what is the best way I could have a permanent loss of capital?
Right.
We're Compound Everything, and we talk about money and markets and investing to self-taught investors who want to get knowledge out there so that others can learn too.
Right. And in doing so, we probably learn more than anybody else.
Yes, which is why we keep doing it.
Right, exactly.
Because we keep
we're
learning.
we're doing it for us. It's selfish.
Yeah, it is selfish. So today, what are we talking about?
We're talking about mental models.
Okay, and what's a mental model?
So Charlie Munger is a huge proponent of mental models. Same with Manesh Babrai. It's just models that guide their thinking in investment, in life, and things like that. And
it's coming at a problem with different ways to approach that problem.
it's kind of like tools in your toolbox.
Absolutely.
As well. And so Charlie Munger, one of his famous quotes is, "I want to know where I'm going to die so that I never visit there."
Yes.
And so if you...
I think he says it at every single annual meeting.
I think he does. I'm pretty sure.
And I mean, he's 98, so...
So it's worked for him so far.
Yeah.
But it's funny because it sounds like a very pithy saying when you start.
Like he's just being silly.
Like he's just being silly. But when you really think about it, he's actually ruled out a number of causes of death. Right? So if he's...
if
he's
serious about that.
Right. He's ruled out accident.
Right.
He's ruled out poisoning. He's ruled out homicide.
Right.
He's ruled out a bunch of other possible causes
Even
of death.
things like bad eating.
Bad eating, right?
He knows there's a family history of heart disease.
Right, exactly, right.
Whatever.
So whatever. So be that as it may, like if he knows he's going to die at a certain place, then he must avoid that area. And again, like you said, it worked out well.
So we kind of been talking about mental models together this week, and then you fell, or you came across
on a Reddit forum.
On a Reddit forum, something else that kind of got your mind spinning down the mental model path.
Now, I'm not an engineer by training, but it's something called but it's called something called the TRIZ principle. And I'm sure there's lots of folks out there who know what that is better than I do. But the article was talking about the TRIZ principle, and there was a specific part in the TRIZ principle that really stuck out, and it kind of jives with Charlie Munger's inversion model, I guess you want to call it that. So he takes a problem and inverts it. So
what does TRIZ stand for?
TRIZ is basically a Russian term. It was developed by a Russian, I think he was a engineer or something. And it basically, in English, it transliterates to theory of inventive problem solving, is what it stands for. And so in that model, there's a specific principle where you essentially solve for failure. So if you want to design a product, you design the product or you attack the product in such a way that you could design you could picture every way that product could fail. Right. Does that make sense? So you want to design a grate or something like that, you would picture every way that grate wouldn't work.
Right. So instead of looking at it through a positive lens, how can we make this particular whatever
product fail
better? You say, what would we do as inventors, as engineers, as problem solvers to make this worse? Right,
to make it worse. Now on the positive,
launch off that.
Right, and I mean there may be other places where the TRIZ principle could be applied too. So just as a for instance, Ford, they use from what I understand, they use the TRIZ principle to redesign gas caps. Okay. So you take this simple problem, which is a gas cap, and people don't like gas caps because they're dirty. They're dirty and they're gross.
You forget to put them back on.
Right, exactly. And so they, but you need them because if you don't put them on right, you have the check engine light comes on, and you don't have one, the gas spills everywhere. So Ford completely redesigned their gas tank so that they don't need it anymore. Right. They don't need gas caps.
So instead of looking at the problem, instead of Ford saying, how can we make the gas cap better?
Yeah. They said, why do we need one at all?
Right.
So it's an interesting way to go about it.
So what you're saying is that you can use different subject areas and you can bring those subject areas and principles and ideas from different subject areas that you might not know a lot, but you can actually use them in mental models and apply them to other areas such as investing.
So we decided to take the route of solving for failure.
Right. Inverting. Solving for failure,
in investing. What are all the ways that we could absolutely make a terrible investment?
Right. I think
we came up with 12 of them.
I think in our conversation it was, what is the best way I could have a permanent loss of capital.
Right. Now, just to highlight the importance of mental models, and I'm going to digress a little bit here. And so I'm trained as a physician. You are not. But in medicine, we were taught a mnemonic. And that helps you make what's called a differential diagnosis. Whenever you're approaching a problem, some patient comes in with leg pain, there's going to be many different causes for leg pain. So that you go through the acronym and you can rule out a bunch of them just off the hop.
What is the acronym?
It's called TIN-MAP.
TIN-MAP, okay.
It's trauma, toxin, infection, immunologic, inflammatory, metabolic, anatomic, autoimmune, psychologic, and I'm missing a few others in there, neurologic. But the point being is that you can take this model and you can take someone who doesn't really know anything about medicine and you can help them to achieve a diagnosis just by going through the, this is a mental model.
Okay.
And so
that way this is also a checklist.
Correct. It's essentially a checklist.
Right.
And so
which is a type of mental model.
Which is a type of mental model. So for instance, if I put you in a situation, I said, okay, you're an emergency department doctor, and a patient comes in with a shin bone that's deformed, and I told you they are in a motor vehicle accident. What's the diagnosis, most likely?
It's broken.
It's broken.
Broken
Why?
leg.
Why is it broken?
Because they probably had some sort of impact there.
Right, it's some impact injury. It's a trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Trauma is the cause for the broken
leg.
So if I told you, though, that they were just walking and all of a sudden it broke.
Right.
Now, that's a bit of a different story. So it's probably still broken. It's deformed. You look at it, you can see the bones poking out.
Right.
But why is it broken? So if you
know.
But if you go through your mental model, you go, well, there was no trauma. So then what is it? It's something with the bone.
So you X off trauma.
So you X off trauma. What is it then? So we go through our model. So
it's not psychological.
It's not psychological, but could it be tumor? Yes.
Right.
Could it be a metabolic problem? Could they just have osteoporosis and their bones are weak and then it broke? For sure.
Right.
Could it be something else? Could it be an infection in the bone?
Right.
Sure. Why not? Right.
Right.
So it could be any of those things. But in that patient's case, they're going to say, "Doctor, am I going to be okay?" In the event that it's just a broken bone, nothing else wrong with it, chances are good, yes, it'll be okay.
Right.
But for the patient who's got a tumor there, it's a completely different kettle of fish.
Right.
So the point being is, you use mental models even in other industries or in other disciplines. So
every discipline has their own models that they use, but you can borrow.
Right. So in this scenario, you can borrow a little bit from engineering, this inversion principle, and then apply it to investing.
Right. And it was you finding that original post on Reddit that talked about
the TRIZ.
TRIZ that got you thinking like,
principle.
Right, like how can I approach investing in a way that I think, how would I do this that everything would go wrong for my portfolio? Right, so that I can avoid it. And that goes back to what Charlie Munger said, tell me where I'm going to die so I don't go there.
So I don't go there, exactly.
Right. So tell me how I can blow up my portfolio so I don't do that.
Right, exactly. So there's 12 things. So we divided them into two different categories. One is business factors and the other is industry factors.
Right.
And so we'll kind of run through them as we go. And we're making this as a bit of a checklist for ourselves, things to watch for.
Right. And we're doing it in the negative because the brain sometimes reacts more intensely to a negative viewpoint. And so if we do everything in the positive, there are times, at least for me, where I do have a checklist, but I've allowed myself to skip over certain metrics, which in the end came back to bite me.
Exactly.
But if it was in a negative checklist where it's like, these are all the things that you could do to have a permanent loss of capital, I'd probably be less likely to skip over any of
these are your risks.
These are my risks.
Yeah, these are the red flags.
Yeah, so because humans are naturally risk averse.
Right, exactly.
So we decided that we would do a negative checklist.
Yeah. And so let's go with the business factors first.
Okay.
So a great way to lose money investing in a business is to buy a low margin business relative to its peers.
Right. So what does low margins mean?
So lower margins means they don't make a lot of money after all their costs.
Right.
So it takes a certain amount to make X product and they do it worse than anybody else, right? Yeah. Or no better than anyone else does. They have no competitive advantage. So that's the first one is they're a low margin business. Second is they have no competitive advantage. Okay. So they're in a business and they don't stick out at all whatsoever.
Their numbers aren't better than anyone else's.
Their numbers are no better than anyone else's. They have nothing that differentiates them in any way.
Okay. Number three,
they have an unserviceable debt.
Okay.
So, or debt that would be unserviceable in the event of some sort of a business downturn.
Right.
Fourthly, they have poor or dishonest management.
Right. And sometimes the nice thing about doing a negative checklist is that it is sometimes difficult to find when you're just reading reports and watching, but oftentimes it's kind of easy to see poor and dishonest management. Like those things stick out a little bit more.
Right. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, well, and at the very least, if you kind of have this as a checklist, you kind of go back on yourself and say, yeah, what is management like? I haven't really looked into that.
Right. Are they poor? Are they dishonest? Let's watch their body language.
Let's watch their body language. Let's see what they've said in the past. Let's see what other people are saying about
Or
them.
let's remember to watch their quarterly calls.
Exactly.
Or to listen.
Yeah.
I say watch because now they sometimes show them in video form.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take time to listen to them, to get their tone, to if we can see their body language.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they being overcompensated compared to their performance and things like that? So another
Are they
potential
talking
indicator.
about mistakes or targets missed from the previous quarterly call?
Are they owning them?
Are they addressing them, or are they kind of pretending they didn't even happen, not bringing them up again?
Yeah. Are they owning them or screwing them away?
Because good management, you could, I mean, if it's excellent management, you can find. If it's mediocre, that's harder. But if you can identify poor management, it's just like
stay away. Yeah. This is point 5. You can buy a business with very little or no track record. So
I've fallen into that trap before.
Yeah. You buy the brand new business. It's just starting out, and
it didn't turn out well.
No, because they're all going to have hiccups, right?
Yeah.
At some point.
Well, and I didn't have a rear view.
Right, there's no rear view mirror. You don't know how the management is. You don't know how their business can execute.
And the rear view doesn't, it's not fortune telling or tell you, but it gives you more of an idea of the path that they're on.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and then lastly, point 6, buy at a high valuation relative to growth and earnings. So overpay. That's another great way to lose money.
Yeah.
So overpay for the business.
So essentially you're saying all the things that happened in 2020 and 2021.
Exactly. Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. So now then we have industry factors.
Right. Industry. So negative industry factors.
So what are the factors in the industry that this business is in that would make it a bad investment?
Right. That could lead to permanent loss.
Permanent loss of capital.
Okay. So we have, they're in a dying industry.
Right.
So what's a company that you think off the top of your head that would have been a bad investment?
Movie rentals.
Yes.
So, but you buy the best company in the movie rental industry, you lost a lot of money. At the wrong time.
Right.
Blockbuster the writing was on the wall, and we all know what happened to it.
Yeah. I think it was Carl Icahn who said that was his worst investment.
Yes, Carl Icahn.
Okay. It's highly competitive. It's in a very, very competitive market.
Right, very competitive industry.
Yeah.
And so there's really not one company that's shown itself to be superior in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Going down that, it's easy to replicate, and it doesn't have a high barrier to
entry.
Yeah.
Right. So trying to think of one off the top of my head.
So many. A lemonade stand.
Yeah, a lemonade stand would be something easy. There's very little capital required.
Right. You just. A hot stock and a hot industry. That's an interesting one.
So a hot stock and a hot industry is a great way to lose money. So the thing that comes to my mind there is the EV frenzy. So I think of Rivian and Lucid. They rose just on the back of Tesla because, well, Tesla is popular, selling lots of cars, but the expectation was that they would do the same thing.
Right.
But it hasn't happened that way so far.
Yeah.
It might.
Right.
They might do okay, but if you had invested even 6 months ago, you're down a significant percentage.
So this being said, it's not to say that a company that is hot at a time in a hot industry won't eventually produce returns if bought at the right price. But the point is that you buy it while it's a hot stock within a hot industry. And what I think of is oil.
Oh, fair enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So back if you bought at the peak of oil, when was that? Like in 2008 or 9-ish, right? If you bought at the peak, you were going to wait until now
to get your money back.
To get your money back.
Wow.
But had you bought, at the a few years prior to that, then you sell when it's a hot stock in a hot industry.
Yes, exactly. Sell into the.
The precisely wrong time to buy is when it's a hot stock within a hot industry.
Right.
.com bubble is another.
.com bubble. Yeah.
Is another example of that. But when everything came crashing down, there were actually some decent companies that were
Amazon was one of them.
bargain to pick up.
Yeah. Amazon's one of them.
Yeah. So one point that we don't have on that just came into my head now is if I want to have a permanent loss of capital, one of the ways that I can go about doing that is to invest in a hot stock tip from a friend with zero due diligence.
Yeah. Okay. So,
And there's always a temptation sometimes when you trust someone and they're like, oh, have you thought about this? And you're lazy and you don't want to put in and you trust them.
And you fear that they're going to make money and you're not going to.
Oh, jealousy. Yeah.
Jealousy.
Yeah, that does.
So another reason.
So that wasn't on our list, but I added it. An industry, if I want to lose money, I will put my money in an industry where I have little to zero knowledge.
Okay. So for me, aerospace.
Yeah.
So I know nothing about aerospace.
Right.
So.
And that doesn't mean there are not good investments in aerospace.
No.
It just means for you.
At least at this time, it doesn't mean I can't learn about it.
I think Munger and Buffett say they have a too hard pile. Now, whether that's just figurative or they actually have a too hard pile where they put, their papers, and I know Buffett does everything by paper.
Right, yeah.
But that would go, we're talking too hard.
Yeah, that would be
it's okay to say
pile.
I have this is too hard for me. So one area that actually we differ in, because usually we find ourselves looking at similar companies, but one area where we definitely differ is medical, biotech.
Right.
So you look at a lot of biotech, given your background and pharmaceuticals, and I just don't even bother.
Right.
Because I don't want to take the time to learn. That'll take a long time to learn, and I am better suited to look at other investments.
Right, and there's a lot of medical jargon.
Right, so you can invest in biotech and make a very good return because you would know what to look for, what companies are promising. But if I invest in biotech, I could lose a lot of money because I could just go on a hope and a dream.
Right.
The CEO could say something and be like, "That sounds good to me."
Yeah.
Next thing
but the question is it likely to happen, or is that real?
Right. Or how like the CEO could tell me like this is going to be industry. This is going to be revolutionary for this tech is going to be revolutionary for doctors, and I'm like, wow, that sounds great, and I can put my money in. And meanwhile, you would read it and be like, that's not going to be revolutionary to doctors.
Right.
They're just blowing smoke.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to catch that.
Yeah, no, that's
so. If I want to lose money, I put it in an industry I don't know about.
Right. And then I think our last one was put your money in a company or in an industry where you can't qualitatively discern whether the business is doing poorly or doing well.
Right. I love qualitative measures.
Yeah.
That's a strength that I have. So that one was huge for me.
For sure.
But can you explain what you mean by that?
So, for instance, walking through Sears. We walked through Sears in a mall near our house.
A while ago now, obviously.
So, yeah, this is about 5 to 7 years ago. And we looked around and said, there's hardly anybody in here.
Even a decade ago, I want to say.
Yeah, and every time we walked through, we'd see this big store footprint, but nobody in the store. And so, eventually, Sears closed. And that was not really a huge surprise to us because we were able to walk through and see that there was nobody shopping in there, and there's a huge store footprint. And so from that standpoint, I mean, as long as it jives with the numbers, you could kind of see the numbers are going down, the foot traffic going down. You could see other competition coming in, even go online and see that they really don't have an online presence. So those are qualitative measures to say that Sears is not doing very well at all.
So here, I'm going to actually even take this a step further. A few years ago, I want to say 5 years ago, you made a comment to your brother that you said Lululemon was going to go out of business in the next 3 years because you walked past the store and it was empty.
Guilty as charged.
And so that's an example of taking, it wasn't a deep dive into quality measure because you walked by the store one evening.
And I made one judgment.
And you made one judgment. And two, you never bothered to look into the numbers to see if that actually made sense, which they obviously, the numbers would not have lined up. You didn't even talk to any women.
No, I didn't.
Including myself.
Right.
So, but that's an example of doing, that's an example of like where qualitative comes in, like you can't just,
you can't make a snap judgment.
You can't just go to the mall and look at one point in time like, oh, there's a lineup there.
But if you're noticing a pattern.
And thankfully you didn't actually
I didn't short it.
Lulu or do anything like that.
No. The point being, I think, as long as the numbers line up with what you're seeing qualitatively, then you have a possible explanation for that. So I think from that standpoint, that's a powerful tool in the investor's toolbox field.
I think qualitative is one of the most powerful.
Well, it's a Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch play.
Yeah, but you have to look at the numbers. So a good way to lose money is that it has zero qualitative measure.
Well, you don't know. You can't tell if the business is doing well or not. So I can invest in an aerospace company, but I'd have no idea whether they were doing well or not.
Right.
Or because I'm not in the industry.
Fully on what you see with your eyes without looking at.
Right.
So I guess you could say a good way to have a permanent loss of capital is to not look at the numbers and solely base it on what I see with my own eyes.
That's true.
Right?
A little of both, right?
A little of both. Yeah, going back.
But likewise, it goes the other way around too, right? When we started seeing more and more Tesla vehicles on the roads where we are, that it came not much as a surprise that Tesla's numbers were going up and getting better and getting better and getting better. So,
and Tesla's numbers, I think, given since we're talking qualitative, I digress, but I think Tesla's going to continue to go up.
I think you're right.
We went from seeing, maybe 1 or 2 a week.
Oh.
To 1 or 2 a day.
At least.
To 5 or 6 a day.
Yeah.
So it's they are definitely becoming more common.
Yeah. So you can tell again the qualitative measure as to whether you can see how that. So I guess to kind of summarize.
Right. To wrap up.
Wrap up what we were talking about. I think I'm just starting to understand the process of inversion now. Really.
Real deep inversion.
Right, exactly. Right. We've always done that. We invert each other. We
always do that. We're really good at one thing about investing with someone that you are very close with and comfortable with is you do not have any problem ripping someone's investment.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So you and I have always inverted each other, but I think doing this and going through this exercise, and again, if any of our viewers have anything they'd like to add to that list of things we put up, either business or industry factors, we'd be more than happy to hear them. Yeah. But one of the things that's done for me, just kind of going through these principles and developing that list, is give me a checklist now of things to look for before I do pull the trigger on an investment. Right. Do I know the company well? Do I know the management well enough? Do I know all these things that I can answer no to those negative factors?
And how bad would it be? Because, we already have positive checklists, right? Like, we already have, companies with little debt to no debt. That's what we like. That is something that we like to look at, right? But sometimes we're willing to skip over it.
Yeah.
But now if you can invert and say, what does it mean to invest in a company that has unsustainable debt? That their debt is just so enormous, one hiccup. What does that mean? And the brain reacts differently, even though the metric is the same.
Well, and I think the reason why is a bit psychological, because people are more sensitive to loss than they are to gain.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Risk averse, which is a whole different
discussion. We'll get into another day. But when you look at that, you're priming your brain from a psychological perspective to take a second thought. Right. When you look at the negative sense.
So there's an article that you read about Charlie Munger.
So the article is summarizing kind of how Charlie Munger used kind of TRIZ methods in order to help derive meteorological maps to help bring
I swear that guy
home safely.
Knows everything.
It's crazy, right? Yeah, I don't know how he's got such a breadth of knowledge.
Right. So he wanted to bring pilots home safely.
Yeah, because he was being trained as a meteorologist in the military.
Okay. Yeah. And in that article, there's just a little sentence here, and it says, if you have a list of actions to avoid, avoiding them begins to move you away from failure and closer to reaching your goals.
Right, which is obviously positive returns in your portfolio.
Right, so for us, we want a list of things to avoid as investors.
Traps, pitfalls.
Right, pitfalls, traps, poor mental models.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid them so that we can grow our portfolio. In the right direction and have compounding work for us.
Well, if you think of that list, at the very least, we won't lose anything.
Right.
Hopefully not.
Right.
Right. So if you can avoid those pitfalls, well, then at least you've not lost anything. If you gained much, maybe not. Maybe not. But at least you haven't lost anything.
Right.
So I hope that was helpful. Again, if you have anything to add to our list, leave us a little message, comment, and we'll be happy to update our list.
Yes, thanks for sitting through our conversation, and we'll catch you next time. Like and subscribe if you found any value for this, because it helps our channel out.
Yep.